I think we've had remarkable agreement here in the room on what it is that we all want, isn't it? We want healthy diets from sustainable food systems. Anybody disagree with that? No, I didn't think so. What do we want? Healthy diets from sustainable food systems. When do we want it? Now. But how? Right? We've had quite a few people today that gave you different elements of what could be solutions, but it's much less clear how to do it. And I would have to say to you, when you step outside of this room into the real world, it's also not so clear that everybody agrees on what we want. I come from agricultural research, and people in agricultural research for decades have had a laser focus on increasing production, or to be more precise, increasing productivity. How many tons per hectare? Particularly from staple cereals, rice, wheat, maize, the stuff that billions of people eat. So to shift to focusing on malnourished people that lack vitamins and minerals, or to shift to obese people is not that obvious. So here we have a panel that are going to try and sort out not just that we want to save the world, as Peter Bakker said, but how, right? So we have for you Michiel Bakker, who is responsible for food services at Google, and he just told me that means he feeds 95,000 people every day. And then we have Sam Kaas, who's a chef, who worked at the White House. That meant, did you actually cook for the first family, Sam?
I did.
So that's
policy,
4 people, but important people.
Yeah, policy and cooking, both.
Yes. Alison Ameter from Canada, who is a pulse farmer and also the chair of the International Year of Pulses. Bruce Kahn, who is an investor from New York, one of the few investors here in the room. And Ole Hansen, also from New York, but from the UN Global Compact, which means the group that works out how business works with the UN. So a very diverse group of people that I've asked to all say, what is your one recommendation to give us healthy diets from sustainable food systems? And let me kick this off from ag research, since there's nobody on that group that will tell you that. And in fact, so ag researchers have figured out a little bit how to deal with undernutrition. Rather than just increasing the total tons per hectare, we've been working for quite a few years now on increasing the vitamin and mineral content of beans and rice and sweet potato, which should mean that now that's being planted by millions of farmers, and we figure that by 2030 a billion people might actually not need to buy Nestlé's and Unilever's fortified products, 20 billion servings, Paul Polman said yesterday, but get their vitamins and minerals directly through their staple foods. That's a pretty big breakthrough. But we have much less of an idea of what to do for obese people. Now, it would be natural that agriculture focuses more on getting more nutritious foods, maybe even green vegetables, to poor people, so to make those much more affordable. And I think that is something we should put a lot more emphasis on. And I think that should be my top recommendation for ag research. But it's not so simple. Now, that same difficult question to all of you then.
All right. Yeah. So my team is responsible for providing delicious and nutritious food to anybody who works in a Google environment anywhere around the world. So on a daily basis, we serve approximately 95,000 people in now 56 countries. And we provide our food for free to the employees, clearly not free to us. And if you provide delicious and nutritious food for free, you have a very broad responsibility to think through what will you offer. And in addition to really thinking about that, we're trying to enable individuals to make personal food choices for sustainable lifestyles. Sustainable both for the individual as well as for the environment. So how would you think about that? So as a provider, there are basically 2 broad levers. You can think about a supply, what will you offer? And you can think about how can you influence demand. So on the supply side, it really starts with whatever we don't offer, they will not eat. It is pretty straightforward, but there is actually a lot of knowledge in that, because we make choices on a daily basis of what 95,000 people will not eat. Yeah. Food choice architecture plays a big role in the supply side as well. It is actually how you present it in what sequence will influence food choices. But just as much on the demand side, What can you do to ultimately influence a very well-educated workforce? And then behavioral economics truly works. Applying the logic of retail in a corporate food service environment really makes the difference. And in addition to that, really thinking about food literacy. If you think about the newest generation that is coming out of the university, too many unfortunately don't know how to cook. So the question is, how can you bring those skills back to those individuals as well? So if you think about the future of actually food, it is really about actually food literacy and really thinking about food choice architecture.
Thank you, Michiel. So, Sam, did you get to decide what the Obamas don't eat?
Yes.
Ah.
I got to decide everything. But it's a power you have to use very carefully.
Yes.
It'll get you in trouble. I must say, both of those answers are very good, especially the research one as well. It's one of the most under-discussed, least sexy topics, but so important. There's a lot of number one things that I would say, and you're only going to make me choose one. And the one I'm going to choose is going to be build on the opening talk by Olivier. I think the number one thing we have to do better is to start marketing the behaviors and life that we are trying to lead. In our community, we've talked so much about the ideals and the aspirations, and we're trying to convince everybody to eat better, to eat more sustainably. We'll get carbon out of the air. You'll get fiber and vitamin B. And Coke is telling you to open happiness. And happiness beats fiber every single day. It kicks the ass of fiber every day. And love and sex, all those aspirations is what we need to use if we're actually going to start getting people to shift their behavior. What Olivier talked about was not some new approach that a nonprofit or a global entity is using. What he described to a T is what every corporation uses to figure out how to market a product to people. The brain scans called NeuroScan is all being used. Micro-targeting, all that stuff. And we are just simply not in the game. We're sitting here saying, oh, it'd be so nice. Just don't you understand? So I would basically take all of my education dollars, all of the money that's being put into these programs, and put it into incredibly sophisticated, well-researched marketing campaigns done by the same entities that are creating the campaigns that have shifted our behavior in the other direction. We have to get in the game if we actually want people to make different choices.
Thank you. So, Alison, is that what you're doing for Pulses?
You know, I think we're doing that in that we are out there marketing the fact that pulses are healthy, they're nutritious, they're sustainable. We're telling people that cereals that are in a pulse rotation are more sustainable than cereals that aren't. But I think we can take it one step past that. We heard what Olivier said about intentions are often different than action. And so a suggestion that the pulse industry is making right now is that we actively work on cereal pulse partnerships. I'm guessing just about everybody in the room this morning had a bagel or a piece of toast or a croissant or a muffin for breakfast this morning, maybe a crepe. If you add 20% pulse flour to that cereal product that you were eating, even if it was a breakfast cereal, you are going to increase your protein by 14%. You're going to increase your fiber by 125%. You're going to decrease your environmental footprint, but you're going to affect things like your postprandial glycemic response. You're going to affect the satiety, which affects overweight. And what you're doing more than anything is you're not changing their intentions. You are changing the outcome. So their intention is still to have that bagel, but we can give them a healthier bagel. We can affect the diseases like diabetes. We can affect the overweight problem by putting healthy foods into the foods we eat all the time. So in that way, I'm a pulse promoter. But I'm not sure if I'm doing it through marketing. I'm doing it through healthy food.
Well, you're just marketing.
Yeah, well,
there you go. Is your lentil bread going to taste good?
It is delicious. It really is. I can tell you that one. Yeah.
So Bruce, you're hearing these ideas. Are those ones that you think you can invest in?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. All of the food chain is an opportunity. It's a marketplace that ultimately is a reflection of the global capital markets. And what are the global capital markets? It really is the market for capital. So if you think back on the map that Ruth had shown earlier of the complex system of trade of food products and agricultural grains and pork bellies and orange juice, all that is a reflection of the flow of capital. So what can we do in the ag world, food and ag world, about that flow of capital? Well, that flow of capital is mediated by a certain metric. And that metric is called the cost of capital. And that cost is ultimately how large corporations and small entrepreneurs make decisions. Now, how do we put pressure or take advantage of those opportunities of the cost of capital? Well, I know that small entrepreneurs are in dire need of capital. So you have a certain area of the market that supplies them with capital, and sometimes at a great cost to those entrepreneurs. On the other hand, the large multinational corporations, they operate globally and also operate on that fulcrum of the cost of capital. And we as investors, and when I say we, I mean all of us, individuals, as well as our institutions, such as our pension funds, our insurance companies. You all own mutual funds in some way or another in your retirement plans. We all have an opportunity to not only decide what we put into our bodies in terms of consumption, but what we're putting in the pockets of the companies that we're supporting through our investments. And that complex web is what a movement in the financial markets is called environmental and social governance investing, or for short, sustainable investing. Now, I was trained as an ecologist and then moved into ecological economics and ultimately into ecological finance, or what we call sustainable finance today. That movement is growing, especially here in Europe, growing in the US and in Asia. And we all have the opportunity to participate in small entrepreneurial businesses, but also we cannot ignore the large complex web that is mediated by handfuls of companies that ultimately respond to the adjustment of that cost of capital. So my top recommendation for change is to really start with yourself, know what you own, then look at what your mutual fund companies own for you, and then look at what your pension fund and insurance companies own for you. Start there. And that's one tool in addition to knowing what you eat.
Know what you eat and be an activist investor then, right? Ola, would your companies welcome that, these activist investors?
Oh, definitely, very much. Yeah. We're both welcoming that and promoting that very actively. And the principles for responsible investment was born out of the UN Global Compact some 5 years ago. And that's something we're very much supportive of and a big driver. Also of what we're ultimately about is obviously making companies around the world increasingly part of the solution to the big global challenges that we face. So, in very simple terms, what we try to do at the UN Global Compact is translate the values and the principles of the United Nations into responsible business practices. And since September last year, of course, translate the Sustainable Development Goals into new opportunities and new markets for business. In respect to food and agriculture, our work, of course, relates to SDG 2, but also the very aligned Zero Hunger Challenge, and we try to engage companies around those responsibilities and opportunities that implies. And why do we do that? Why do we work primarily with business? We now have 9,000 company participants around the world. We do that, of course, because we realize that many companies are still part of the problem. They're part of the reason why the food system is broken. But I would say even more importantly, because overcoming these problems, fixing the system, whether we're talking about more sustainable production, whether we're talking reducing waste, whether we're talking about increased productivity or consumption, across all of those areas and all those most important parts of this problem, we really need forward-looking corporate leadership to help us fix this and to help us solve this. So on your question about the one thing that I would like to highlight here, it's really the need for us to focus on smallholder farmers, around 500 million around the world, and they're really the key, I believe, and we believe, to having a sustainable food system that ultimately can provide a healthy diet for coming up to 9 billion people around the world. And here again, businesses have a really key role to play, and we believe there are plenty of opportunities out there for both small entrepreneurs and big businesses to really help connect those smallholder farmers to innovation, to the markets, and to the resources that they need to increase productivity and to be able to actually have farming become a more attractive economic opportunity around the world.
Thank you. Those are some quite interesting answers, I think. Can we see if we can dig a little deeper? And when you were saying what you're recommending, Michiel, I was thinking, having been a Googler some time back, I remember eating a lot of delicious pizza, and I wonder what would have happened if you tried to take the pizza away, or even, the other rule at Google was you have to have a snack stand within 50 meters of every desk with lots of chocolates and so on, fruit as well. But, so are your Googlers responding well to your meddling with their behavior, if you like? And the other question is a bit, how do you translate what you're recommending not to Googlers, who are sort of the most pampered employees on the planet, I think, if I remember? Because knowing that the 2 billion underfed and overweight tend to be poor people, how does that work for those people?
So as a starting point, things have changed since you were with us.
No more pizza?
There still is a place for pizza as well. What we're trying to do is actually make the better alternative, a more attractive alternative, because flavor truly rules. It doesn't matter what you say, people eat with their mouth. So you have to make sure that the alternative that is healthier is actually tastier as well. So I think that is one. The second one is purely availability. If you would go to our micro kitchens these days, the first thing that you're going to see are 5 bowls with fresh fruit, because what you see first really makes the impact, makes the difference. As it relates to the impact that we make or not make in the broader world, I think as a starting point, you need to do what you do really well. And I think what we're doing, we're very progressive in thinking through food at work. And we hope that what we learn, we inspire our providers, organizations like Compass, like Selectro or Aramark, to incorporate what we learned together into other industries that they serve as well. Secondly, what we've learned, we share as well with the broader world, whether it's in a venue like this. So our goal is not from a food services provider at Google to think about ultimately the 9 billion people altogether. That is outside of our scope.
Not outside of yours, right? When you said we're going to market, we're going to take those techniques from those companies, are we going to get Peter Bakker to get all his companies to market different things, or are we going to get different organizations to use their techniques? I'm not quite sure where you're going to take this. Can you?
The answer is both. I think the answer has to be both. But we have to fight fire with fire. I mean, if you want to offset that kind of influential marketing, you have to get in the game, I think is the main point. But also we need to put a lot of pressure on responsible marketing, particularly young people. And it's a complicated, tough one because a lot of the speech is protected by, at least in the United States, this thing called the First Amendment. It's kind of a big deal for us. I want to go, though, to the points about investment and the capital markets, because I think it's one of the most under-discussed but most important parts of the equation that doesn't get anywhere near the attention it deserves. And it's not just a food problem. So there's a systemic short-term thinking that's embedded and incentivized in the way companies have to operate because of quarterly reports. And I've worked with basically every major food company in the United States. Some of them are terrible, some of them are okay, and some of them are really trying to do the right thing. But all of them, especially the ones that are trying to see where we're going, see what needs to happen, are constantly run up against embedded and structural short-term thinking. And if they go too far down the path and looking to invest in a much more aggressive plan for the future that isn't going to have a return on investment in the next year, 2 years, or 3 years, it's kind of a non-starter because they'll get crushed on Wall Street and probably fired by the board. And looking at how and this is not one that's going to be solved just in food, right? This goes across lots of different industries.
Yeah.
But if we could figure out how to, Unilever, Paul Pullman just stopped doing quarterly reports for this reason, and you see what he's been able to do with that company. Without that, he would never have been able to do what he did. He would have been gone. So I think it's something that we got to get much more engaged in and expand the network of people who are engaging way beyond just food, to think about how we provide the space for CEOs to take much more bold action and not be punished in the markets for that kind of risk.
I worked in Silicon Valley. Projects had to be successful not in years, but in 2 or 3 quarters.
Right.
Otherwise, they were shut down. So, do activist investors have a role in sort of getting companies to think more long-term, Bruce?
Yes, absolutely. And there's companies who take a longer-term view in investing in sustainable practices, sustainable operations, cost-cutting, energy efficiency, better workplace environment, better stakeholder relations, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. There's ample evidence, both academically and in industry papers and work and actual data in the marketplace, that shows that those companies who perform better on environmental, social, and governance factors perform better on financial metrics, so accounting metrics such as return on equity, cash flow stability, and increased dividend yields. Now, whether that really ultimately gets priced in the short term is messy. But in the long term, it absolutely fundamentally gets priced. And those investors who use this view of the world in order to make investments end up with superior risk-adjusted returns over longer periods of time, such as 5, 7, and 10 years. So that is the theory of and premise of my firm, Sustainable Insight Capital Management, is to be ahead of the repricing of ESG risk as it gets repriced every day. How that applies to ag is absolutely true. It applies to lots of industries. Agriculture, and I'm more exposed to agriculture, upstream agriculture than really food and consumers, because they kind of consumer companies operate a little bit differently. Yeah. But food and ag companies historically have been family-held businesses that ultimately got so big that they ended up going public, or some of them are still private. But they're much closer held businesses. Yeah. So you really have to get to know these businesses over years to really understand their initiatives and how that's playing out in the culture of the firm. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that only from reading a 10K report. You have to do a 360-degree analysis of these firms. And that's why there's this huge growth in ESG data and ESG data firms in order to capture these external, what people used to call extra financial issues around companies. But there is ample evidence that this type of investing is superior, and there are many people lining up for the UNPRI. The CDP has a signatory base of $91 trillion. So actually, it really doesn't even matter whether you believe it or not. The rest of the money believes it. And like I said earlier, the fulcrum of how companies change their behavior is based on that cost of capital. And if the supply and demand of the security or that capital for those firms is changing based on this lens, that is actually a pathway forward to making these companies more sustainable. And I would argue that the capital markets is one of the most largest scale system on the planet today that we can use as a carrot and a stick in order to achieve sustainability goals. I'm all for community-supported agriculture. I own, a local dairy that's totally, organic, and that's awesome, right? And farmers markets, and we need all of it. But if we ignore the large, big ag capital market system, we won't achieve the sustainable food system we're all seeking. So I would urge you to go back and look at your investments.
And you're positive that we can work with the big bad capital markets. That's good news. Yes. But the other big group, I think, Alison, I want to also talk about the power of consumers. And when you want to put more lentils in bread, I think the one government that I knew that considered something like that is the Nigerian government, and they wanted to put cassava in bread. Not because it was more healthy, but because cheaper, and it would reduce their wheat import bill. Now, are the things you're proposing affordable? Are people going to pick that in the supermarket because it's not more expensive? Or how are we going to get consumers to buy into
Well,
pulses?
and it's a good question. And the really, we have a lot of good messages around pulses besides their nutrition and their health benefits. They're also really very economical. The cost of a ton of wheat is just about the same as the cost of a ton of pulses. So for a bread manufacturer, for anybody else that's wanting to add pulses, they're actually a very economical alternative. For a consumer that wants to add pulses, they can, say, add half lentils to their meatloaf, and they're cutting the cost, keeping the same general flavor and feel profile, and increasing their health benefits. So, yeah, it's an economical alternative too. And we're really trying to get that message out to consumers that they're flexible, they're economical, and they're delicious.
And they taste good, yes.
Yeah.
That's all good news, yeah. Ola, final words, listening to those others?
Well, maybe just tying the two things together, because I think we've been seeing in kind of the company-investor relationship for many years that companies were complaining over investors not caring and not kind of evaluating the kind of positive actions that they were taking on sustainability, and investors, on the other hand, complaining about the lack of material information, etc. But I think the Gordian knot are kind of being loosened up at this moment, and I'm really sharing the optimism of colleagues here on the panel. I think with respect to consumers, there's been a little bit of the same kind of consumers and consumer groups complaining about the lack of choice, the lack of availability, affordability, etc. And businesses, of course, as we've heard earlier, complaining about the fact that consumers really do not appreciate more sustainable food choices and do not kind of act according to what they might say in surveys. So here, I think we firmly believe that leadership on the corporate side needs to go first. You can't just sit around and wait for the consumers. And we are, fortunately seeing some of the leading companies moving in that direction and going beyond what you could say the same kind of short-termism you see in capital markets, you also see in consumer markets and marketing, where you're kind of guided by what consumers say they want today, these, market research, what do you want, what flavor do you want, what color do you want, and more being guided by really what are some of the long-term challenges that we know will need to get fixed, and then say, well, if we're guided by them in terms of what types of markets we want to build and tap into, then we know we can build a long-term business. So that's, I think, what needs to move first, and we're seeing that in some areas.
So we're actually pretty optimistic in this panel that, what we want, we can get. So what is it we want? Healthy diets from sustainable food systems. When do we want it?
Now.
We're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
The timing is pretty good on it.
Thanks.